just bringing a deeper understanding of this land we live and work on today, and awareness about how we can move forward together in authentic and true reconciliation. So we'll bring Rodney over.
Hi everybody, I'm Rodney Kelly. And my grandfather has passed away, Gubbu Ted Thomas. He's one of the last lawmen of the South Coast. And my great-great-grandfather, Murrum, he was one of the last men to be initiated on Mumble Mountain, the old ways, the old traditional ways that they did for thousands of years. And you know, when settlers first arrived in the Cobargo area, they said that his family, my great-great-grandfather, Murrum Carter, his family were here around that time when the settlers first arrived in Cobargo. You know, Cobargo is a very special and sacred place. You know, to the south, we have Mumble Mountain, where young men would go there and get initiated and you know, become men then. You know, they'd go through the ceremony and become men. You know, to the north, you know, we have Gulaga Mountain. That was primarily a women's area where the women would go and learn about life and you know, do their ceremony and stuff. Also up north, you know, we have Walliga Lake Reserve, which was a reserve where, you know, a lot of Aboriginal people were taken to back in those early days, where they'd have a manager and they were told, you know, they weren't allowed off Walliga Lake Reserve until that, you know, without permission, without the proper, you know, permission. You know, wasn't allowed to teach culture to the young ones. You know, and that's why a lot of culture around this area now is lost. And we're slowly starting to revive it back and teach the younger generation now all about this culture. So Cobargo, you know, is right in the middle of such a sacred area. Out to the west and in Cobargo here, you know, this was the area and where axe heads are being found, you know, that are hundreds of years old. There was one found up at the school under one of the buildings. Also out there in the creeks, we have rock grinding grooves that are thousands of years old out in the creek out there. So, you know, Cobargo is a very special place where we'd meet, do trade, and also, you know, camp, while the women would go one way to have their ceremony and the men would go south. You know, so yeah, it's a very special country. You know, I've been all over Europe, many other places around the world, and you know, Cobargo is always so much beautifuler than any other place I've been to. So I'm very, you know, proud to call Cobargo home, and I'm very proud to know, you know, the family history of Cobargo. And you know, the Dirrangarnge people, you know, have been here for thousands of years, and you know, I just want to pay respects to the elders, you know, past and present. Just pay respect to them, and welcome everybody, you know, to Cobargo. Such a, you know, sacred and beautiful place that's really means so much to me. So I welcome you all to this, you know, sacred area of Cobargo, Dirrangarnge people of the Yuin Nation.
Thank you so much, Rodney, for everything that you do, lovely man. All good. So what would be possible if we all came together to design a renewable energy future for Cobargo and the surrounding area? Well, this powerful question continues to guide us in our quest to become a strong, resilient community in all ways. We all remember the terrible impact of the bushfires of 2019, 2020. It was like suddenly living in a third world country. So clearly highlighting the vulnerability of our national energy grid. It just didn't stand up to what we needed at all. But prioritising resilience and energy efficiency to ensure that we are better able to face any future disasters was really a no-brainer, really. Our community has been incredible responding to that invitation to come together just to find a better way forward. Renewable Cobargo and the Cobargo Microgrid projects are an initiative of Cadet, Cobargo and District Energy Transition. And Cadet is a coalition of residents, business owners, farmers, and other interested parties working to improve the energy system in the region and just accelerate the transition to 100% clean, renewable energy. We're very, very fortunate to be working with our expert consultants, ITP, who are all here today, and are supporting us to bring this project to life. Without them, we just wouldn't have the technical expertise, so we're very grateful. So there's a whole crew of them here today, and they'll provide a bit of a progress update, more details, as a follow-up from that initial introductory meeting held via Zoom a few weeks ago. Mark Coates from Intelligent Automation will also present some slides via Zoom on the GS switch device, which will be used in the load management control part of this feasibility study. Now, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. Any of you on Zoom, you can go into the chat and put questions through the whole time. We'll be monitoring that. And anyone here in person, there'll be opportunities throughout the presentation to ask questions that you have. So store them up and get them ready. We're here to answer everything that you need to know. We truly are, though, committed to just engaging with and keeping community informed regularly throughout this project. So stay tuned for future meetings. We're going to keep it pretty regular, every 6 to 8 weeks at the most throughout the year. And we'll try and give you a heads up each time as far forward as we can. You can also stay informed via our website, renewablecobargo.com. And please, please feel free to contact us via the website if you'd like to be involved in any way at all. And no matter your skills, your interests, whatever, there will always be something that you can contribute, something that you can do to help, and we'll always bring you in. So don't hold back. But right now, I'll hand over to Muriel from ITP. Thanks, Muriel.
Thanks, Deborah. And welcome everyone, both online and here. I work out where we're going to go. Firstly, I'll introduce you to some of our ITP team who are here today and give you a little bit of an update on the project and what we're trying to do with it, and look at some designs and potential sites for solar arrays to fit onto a microgrid for Cobargo, give a little bit of a preliminary ideas on what the design might look like and what the cost might be, and how you might finance it based on what other communities are doing. I'll let Rob talk to you about the load management trial, as well as Mark online, and you can have a look yourself at some of the devices that you might choose if you wish to participate in that trial. And then we'll answer questions, both from people online and people here. I think you all, do you want to introduce the Cobargo Cadet team, or I think we have half of the team here or thereabouts. So put your hand up for the Cadet people who are here. Yay! So they're doing all the hard work on the ground in community, and ITP is supporting them with the technical side of things. So I think Deborah's already sort of given you an indication of the Cadet vision. ITP is a renewable energy company. We've always worked with renewable energy and pretty much only renewable energy. And the original company was set up about 40 years ago. So that's how long we've been working to get renewable energy into the mainstream. In Australia, the office was set up in 2003. So we have engineering and energy policy and strategy, economics, all the aspects of bringing renewable energy into the market and into your communities. Today, my name is Muriel Watt. We have Clara here, right at the back there. We have Rob here, there. We have Susan here. And Oliver isn't here, but there he is there. So we're in the project to bring technical and economic and renewable energy generally project expertise to the community to help you to develop a microgrid here. We have experience in microgrids and renewable energy systems generally, both off-grid and on-grid, and quite a few microgrid systems that we've done or worked with over the last few years. A few of them are listed there, as well as quite a long history of working in the Pacific on renewable energy mini-grids, which are isolated power systems which aren't connected to any other grid, whereas a microgrid is connected to the main grid and a mini-grid is a standalone system. So feel free to ask us any questions. I'll go into the background of this project, which came out of your bushfire experiences and having lost power for such a long time and all the implications of that. And so this is you can see in that picture here, the period when you lost power during the bushfires. And so you just kind of had, well, actually, is that from the bushfire, Rob? Is that the exact time of the bushfire? Yeah. So it was quite, for some people, quite a long outage. And that's because you're fed from this feeder from Bega. So that green line goes up to Cobargo. So if anything happens either on that green line between Cobargo and Bega or anywhere in this Bega line, you lose power. So you're fairly vulnerable. And the idea from the community was that a microgrid in town with all your essential loads at least connected to it would provide you with some backup in those times in future when you might have outages. So the previous grid, the grid you've got now, is all this bit, the loads connected to the main grid. And what we're looking to do is connect the orange bit at the top with solar generation, batteries, and a backup diesel to get you through those times when the grid's cut off. So that's the bit that we're working on now. Small writing, but it's just giving you the background to the funding for this project. We've got money from the Regional and Remote Communities Reliability Fund to do a feasibility study and all the planning processes for a microgrid. So most of the money is going into that approval process. The development applications, the applications for the network connection to the grid, and the whole regulatory process of allowing a microgrid to operate, because, well, believe it or not, we still have not got the processes in place for these to happen as a matter of course in our electricity system. So there's quite a lot going on to get that approved. We hope that the project here and projects like it will provide a framework for other places to be able to install microgrids much faster and more easily if the processes are better established. We're also doing the load management trial that I mentioned that Rob will talk about those devices in your homes to reduce power needs during an emergency to make the power in the microgrid stretch further for your emergency supplies. We have the engineering team working on designs and then management and reporting to the government process. So we broken up the work into the microgrid part of the project and the load management part of the project, although they're obviously linked. And we're working with Cadet, obviously, and the Cobargo community generally. Bigger Valley Shire Council is supportive of the project and knows what we're planning to do. Essential Energy, which is the network supplier in this region, is also working with us on the grid aspects of the project, and the federal government is funding the project. So your aims, what Cobargo wanted out of this work was energy resilience for the community to have essential loads powered in an emergency in future. They also wanted to look at what community ownership of aspects of the power supply here could look like. And they also want to achieve a renewable energy target within the region. So there's sort of three things that the community had agreed before we came in to work on the project. So where we are now is about 6 months into the formal part of the project. You can see the timeline there, and we've selected devices that you can use for your load management and they're here. We need to get your enough participants to start that trial soon. We've started working on the design and the technical feasibility, the network modelling, and just preliminary work on working with council on the development application side of things. We can't really do that till a site is finalised and so on. And we've also started to look at the regulatory processes. So Susan is now going to tell you where we are in terms of the microgrid design and the sites that the community has suggested to us that might be suitable.
Thanks, Muriel. Yes, I'll just give a bit of an update on how far we've gotten with the preliminary engineering for this microgrid and what that could look like for Cobargo. So one of the main purposes of this microgrid was that during an outage in an emergency that we would be able to keep some of those key community loads powered. So things like, you know, the RFS, the power, the service station, the RSL hall, the cool space, things like that. And so we had a look at where those all were geographically in relation to the electricity network. And the good news is that they are almost all on that main street, quite close to each other and on the same electricity line. So it's a bit hard to see, unfortunately, for my mouse on this screen, but basically we've got a zoom in picture here of where the loads on the powered are, and this red line is basically one electricity line. So we would be able to keep as much of that powered as possible in an emergency. And so, for example, here's another blue one that we may not be able to keep powered maybe for a short amount of time, but it doesn't have those key community loads that we're really focusing on. And this black one is just that 33 main line to power Cobargo that Muriel was talking about. If that goes down, that's basically what causes an outage for Cobargo. As a cool space for people in an emergency. Okay. Yeah. So what would that look like basically then as a microgrid to power that? We've had a look at the you know, how much electricity is used on that red line that I talked about, and therefore we can have a look at what generation we need to supply that for a certain amount of time. So in our preliminary modelling, we've looked at keeping that entire line powered for 2 weeks with the conditions of an outage in summer, when you might expect a bushfire, and also taking into account that in a bushfire you would not have as much sunlight to power those panels as during normal conditions. So preliminary results indicate that we might need around 3 megawatts of solar. The exact area for that will depend on the site and what kind of mounting system ends up being suitable for that site, but roughly around 3 to 6 hectares of area for that solar. We've just got here as an example 2 different kinds of mounting that you may see in, kind of small solar farms of this size. There will also be a community-sized battery for storage. So that will basically charge up from the solar and then be able to obviously still provide power during the night or when the solar is not operating. And the idea is that both the solar and the battery will operate obviously in that microgrid emergency condition, but then also during normal grid connected operation as well. The idea being that, electricity can be generated and sold back to the grid for some revenue. The microgrid would probably also have some size of diesel generator in there as well. That would only operate in those conditions where there is an outage, and so hopefully not very often. So knowing these sizes of generation helps us think about what we're looking for in terms of the site, but there's also a lot of other things that we need to consider in terms of what would make a suitable site for us to put this solar generation and battery on. One of the important ones is the network access, basically close to the substation or that red feeder. And then we also have to consider other things like, how flat is the land, which way is it facing, because only certain things are going to be suitable for those solar arrays. Does it have the area? What is the access to site? Is there already an access road, for the construction period? Are there tall trees around there that would either need to be cleared or even on, the boundaries may shade the array? And then of course, from a development perspective, how suitable is it? Is the zoning correct? Is it too close to residences and that kind of thing as well? So based on that criteria, we've done a bit of a desktop assessment of which sites may be suitable to put the solar on. And you can see here basically what we've considered. We've narrowed it down now actually to the ones hatched in white, if you can see that. So we've got Cobargo there in the middle, and you can see the extent of that red feeder, and the white lots are the ones that I guess are still potential sites that we're looking at. So we're in the process of, discussing with landholders, as well as New South Wales government for Crown land, which is the sports ground option.
And just to clarify, it's not actually taking over the sports ground.
No.
It's the Narira, there are land all around it, parts of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wouldn't impact use of the sports ground. The old golf course.
Yeah.
Clarkson. Yeah.
In fact, I think that's a good clarification. It may be unclear here too, but these are the actual whole lots where we're looking at, but certainly the area of the solar farm would be nowhere near that size. Yeah, it would just be, say, a small part over here or something like that. Yeah, so I guess just rehashing that, those white sites that we're looking at going forward, these are the kinds of things that we will have to consider. Obviously, landholder preferences are a very important one, and we'll be, discussing with the community and landholders the entire way through the project. The availability of New South Wales Crown land, if it does end up being, suitable, then there might just be a few more regulatory or development kind of processes that we may need to work through. So we're engaging with the New South Wales government and Cadet on that one. And yes, of course, just technically how suitable it is as well. So here just shown really some very indicative layouts, more to give an idea of size than anything else. So these are shown on the sports ground site. A lot more information is needed to know whether these will be anything like what is possible, but this does just give you a very preliminary indication of what something could look like. Just one side of it, or this is another alternative to the southeast. Okay, so what does a system of this size roughly cost? There's a lot of different factors that come into this, but one of the ones that is worth discussing is also the diesel generation and how much that can make a difference. It turns out that, for example, a 400 kilowatt or kVA diesel generator would mean that you wouldn't need to build any solar or battery, but obviously that's not a very environmentally friendly solution. However, some diesel generation could make this system cheaper. So, for example, if we were to try to power the entire feeder for 2 weeks, as we discussed, without any diesel generation, we might be looking at around the 3 megawatts, as I said, of solar and 7 megawatt hours of battery, which you know, has an initial cost of around $11 million. But if we put in, say, a 200 kilowatt diesel generator, then both the solar and the battery capacities can be reduced, and therefore the cost as well. Note that these are just preliminary. There's more complexity that comes into it, including, for example, the fact that your solar and your battery can earn revenue for you as well, or for the owner from the grid, from the exports as well. So this is more just to indicate that there's a lot of factors that need to be considered, and we will be talking with the community, you know, about preferences and what works best going forward. So on that, I'll pass to Clara, who will talk about different structures for community ownership.
Hi everyone, thanks. So one of the exciting opportunities for this project is the opportunity for it to be partly or wholly community owned. So I'll be talking a bit about the legal structures and the funding options for that. So in terms of legal structures, firstly, why is it important to choose one? And there's really two main reasons. The first is to ensure that there's clear and transparent processes around governance. So for projects like this, there's a lot of legal contracts that need to be in place for the construction, the maintenance, the leasing of the land. And so knowing which entity is actually going to hold those contracts is really important. And also to enable investment into the project, because wherever the money is coming from, it needs to go into the right place and into the correct legal entity. Do I have to pick one structure? So often community projects will use more than one structure. So there'll be an organisational level structure and then also a separate project company which will hold the specific contracts for that, and that's known as a special purpose vehicle. In terms of when the structure needs to be established, the deadline is really when the financing needs to be in place so construction can commence. However, it pays to start thinking about that a lot earlier in the process, because some of the structures, for example, have restrictions on how many members there can be, some don't. So you want to make sure that whichever structure is chosen is going to align with the financing plan. These are the 6 most common types of legal structures for community energy projects. So on the left-hand side, you can see the cooperative structure, which is defined as a very democratic, member-led type of structure. There's a minimum of 5 members needed for a cooperative, and there's no limit on how many members there can be. Cooperatives can raise funding and they can also distribute benefits to their members. And currently they're regulated at the national level, and there's also state level and national guidelines are being developed. So an example of a cooperative is the Orange Community Renewable Energy Park, which is partly owned by a cooperative in the Orange region, and that is a 5 megawatt solar farm with a 5 megawatt hour battery. Then you've got your company structures, so that can be either public or private. Both are regulated by ASIC and have a lot of rules about compliance and reporting. The main difference is that public companies can make public offerings for investment and there's no limit on the number of investors, whereas for private companies, there's a limit of 20 investors over a 12-month period that invest a total of $2 million. An example of a publicly owned project is the Missouri Valley Community Solar Farm, which is one developed by SolarShare in Canberra. And then Shoalhaven Solar Farm is an example of one owned by a private company. There's also other structures like an incorporated association, which is a group that comes together for a common purpose. However, one of the drawbacks of an incorporated association is that they can't make financial returns to members. So any profits that are made need to be reinvested into the activities of the organisation. And Pingala is one association that has a portfolio of solar projects. There's also the trust structure, which is established to serve a specific group of beneficiaries. And again, as with the private company, there's limits on the number of beneficiaries. So it's, again, the 20 over the 12-month period. And Clear Sky Solar Investments over the past few years has created over 36 trusts for a portfolio of 12 megawatts of solar projects. And lastly, there's the sub-fund of a managed fund. So this is where there's a fund that's managed by an existing third party. Again, there's no limit on the number of investments, but there's much less community involvement, for example, to the co-op or the public company or the incorporated association. So the Sapphire Wind Farm is a really large wind farm based in New South Wales that a few years ago did an investment raise of 1.3 million through this sub-fund structure. In terms of funding options, there's a lot of options out there ranging from debt finance to equity, either from the community, angel investment where the investment is at an earlier, more high risk stage of the project, or from institutional investors, grant funding, and that can either be from the council level, state governments, or at the federal level, donations from businesses, community members, or philanthropic bodies where there's no expectation of a return, it's just money given in kind. And then crowdfunding, which is usually using an online platform to gain a lot of small pledges that together add up into a substantial investment. So I'll just hand over briefly to Frank from Cadet, who is just going to speak a little bit about how Cadet's discussions around these are going. Frank.
Just very briefly, because we've been doing some thinking ourselves, and which we need to start stepping up and speaking with potential partners. I think the critical thing in thinking about the ownership model is our objective is to maximise local benefits. And I think that's not just, that's both the financial benefits in terms of any the revenue and incomes that are created, but also in terms of the security, long-term financial gain that comes from having shifted us as a community towards low emissions. I mean, I'll give you an example, the Shoalhaven solar farm, and it's terrific, all the effort that was put into it, but what you ended up with is a private company that participates in the energy market and sells to largely corporate buyers the electricity, but also is effectively selling the net zero part of it, so that you can't now claim that Narira is less, has less emissions. Whereas if we have a structure where, and it relates also to the retail function of this, where the benefits in terms of emissions gains, as well as the financial benefits accrue to the local community is part of our objective. So I think we're really wrestling with all of this. And obviously, whether there's some kind of cooperative structure or some financial institution that has local ownership of individuals, they're all possibilities, but it does come back to the funding, because the more grant funding that's available for the project, the more flexibility we'll have in what we might be able to do. And I think the reality is that this probably grant funding is a much more realistic possibility for the battery component than for the solar farm component. And so we may end up with going down a path where there's different ownership structures for different elements. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
I just have one question. So where the funding comes from, does that directly impact what sort of ownership model?
I think it'll help shape that. That's right. Absolutely. And the more it's money that's granted effectively to the community, I think the greater the chance of, you know, getting a structure that maximises local benefits. But there are obviously possibilities of forming partnerships with corporate interests where it's a hybrid model. And Zena particularly, you know, had some good leads on that kind of possibility. But I'll just leave it at that.
Frank, I'll now hand over to Rob, who is going to give you an update on the load management trial.
Next slide. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'll just be talking about these things. These slides are very similar to the slides that I showed at the last community meeting. I'm doing that because I'm not sure how many people here and online were at the last community meeting, so I thought I'd just quickly go through those, and also it just helps to remind people, even if they were at that meeting, what sort of things we're planning. So I'll be talking about what is the load management trial, why we're doing it, how we're actually managing people's loads, what devices we're using to manage those loads. If you want to participate in that trial, is there anything you need to do during the trial? What happens at the end of the trial, and what you do if you want to be involved in the trial. Okay, so the bit in red is the new part. So this is all, basically we're looking for volunteers, people who actually want to be involved in the trial. And so we started up, we need your help, and we certainly do. We're aiming for about 30 people. And so far we've only got 11 households who volunteered and 1 business. So that's 12, we need 18 more, ideally. Participation is free in the trial. And what we'll actually be doing in the trial is about 10 times a year, we will be controlling key appliances in your home, whichever ones you've actually selected that you want to have controlled. That will include things like water heaters, refrigerators, air conditioners, batteries, pool pumps, and they might be turned down, turn up, or turn off. In the next few slides, I'll explain a bit more detail what we'll actually be doing, what specifically that means. And then again, as I said, households and businesses can participate. We're hoping for 30 participants. The trial lasts for 1 year. We're hoping to start the trial mid-year this year. So we want to actually have the devices installed in June and trial starting in July. Okay, so why are we doing it? So the microgrid that everyone's been talking about has to be sized to meet the maximum loads. That means that the large-scale solar we're talking about and the batteries have to be sized to meet maximum demand and also demand for a period of time. So the first point there is the load is both the power needed at any one time. So that's most likely to be in summer when everyone's got the air conditioners turned on, or maybe in winter when everyone has their heating turned on. So that's when you have your maximum instantaneous sort of power draw. But yeah.
So the local microgrid's going to be powering not just critical functions in town, everybody's.
It won't be powering everybody. It'll be powering a certain feeder And that feeder does include businesses, but it also does include households. That's still the case, isn't it? So quite a few households in Cobargo itself, not surrounding, but in Cobargo itself, who are on that feeder will also be powered. And that's why we're including households in the trial. Yeah. So as well as the instantaneous power, it's also the power, say, overnight, because we're powering this with solar. Then you might have 3 or 4 days when there isn't a lot of sun, or even just overnight when there's no sun. Then you need to size your system, in this case the battery, to be able to keep people powered for that period of time. And a few times each year that can be quite large. And the idea of the load control trial is to reduce that instantaneous demand and also the demand over time. So that chart I've got there shows it's just sort of an idealized average household demand profile. So going across the bottom, people on the cup, we might see that's midday. That's midnight through midday into the evening. And so here you have your morning, everyone gets up, makes breakfast, puts on the toaster, etc., puts on the electric kettle, get a power jump. In the middle, not so much power. Then in the evening, when you're cooking meals, etc., turning on all the lights and that sort of thing, that's when you generally have your peak. And also you might have a slightly earlier peak if you have a hot day and everyone's got the air conditioning on. Okay, so the critical times here are when overnight you have no sun, and here, and then the peak demand up in the top. Then this shows the same diagram again. I'll run through that in just a second. But first I'll just go through the text. So we'll every so often, maybe between 5 and 10 times in the year, we have what we call a load control event or a load management event. And we contact you 48 hours before then, let you know it's going to happen, and give you a lot of time to opt out if you just don't want to do it. You've got lots of people coming over, you don't want anything changed, you can opt out, no problem. And it says you can opt out up to 6 hours before the trial, but realistically, even a couple of hours before the trial starts, I'm sure we'll be able to take you out of the trial. And then you're still in the overall trial. You might have opted out of that event, but you're in the overall trial for the rest of the year. And then we manage the loads using commercially available devices, and they attach to your meter box, or they might attach to particular loads like air conditioner or a water heater. And then here's what I was talking about before, where they can be turned down, up or off. So an example of turning down is air conditioning for a few hours. An example of being turned up is you might turn the water heaters on in the middle of the day to soak up the excess solar in the middle of the day, instead of turning them on in the evening. And then turn off, you might just turn off your pool pumps. If especially in a fire situation, then sort of a discretionary load that you don't really need on. So you can turn off things like pool pumps. And all those devices will be controlled at a central point. During the trial, they'll be controlled from within Cobargo, probably from the community centre, maybe by Matt sitting over there, he might be controlling them. And then just the examples in this figure. So here you've got your overnight water heater, your controlled load water heater, you can turn that off, that reduces the overnight load. And you shift that into the middle of the day. That increases the middle of the day load, so you soak up your solar. And then here you can reduce the power drawn by your air conditioner, so it reduces that evening load. So it reduces the maximum power output that you need from your solar and battery. Okay, so what devices are we using to actually do this? We've looked at quite a few different devices, and we've come up with these 3: G-Switch, Watt Watchers, and Carbon Track. And we selected these partly because we can use them to control the loads, but also because the load control, the load management will only be happening, in 5% of the year or 2% of the year. They'll only be happening very occasionally during the year. The rest of the time, we wanted to provide you with something that you can actually use yourselves to monitor your electricity use, monitor your solar output, etc. And you can also control them as well. So you can use these devices to actually control when and how much electricity you're using. And people install, they cost about $1,000 each to be installed, but for anyone participating in the trial, they're absolutely free. And these images here show, these are just some sample images. This is from G-Switch one right there. I think this one is from Carbon Track. They just show you how your load changes a lot of information. In the next, very soon, Mark Coates from Intelligent Automation, who provide G-Switch, will be giving a quick demonstration or a quick presentation on what his device can actually do. But the key point here is that we wanted to provide you with devices that will not only use for the load management trial, but that you can use for the rest of the year. That will be helpful to you. Now, okay, so I'll hand over to Mark. Matt, do I need to do anything special, or does Mark just? Okay, you're almost.
Give me 1 sec.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Can?
Cool. Well, thanks for inviting me today to have a chat. Mainly an overview on what a HEMS system is and what a HEMS does. It can be called either a DER, a distributed energy resource, or an EMS system, an energy management system. So I'll just read the text that we have here. What an energy management system, there's two components to an energy management system. There's the hardware, and it's generally a mechanism that is attached to your switchboard that links to the appliances that are connected to your home. And in some cases, it's connected to distribution companies. So in your area, it'll be connected to the likes of Essential Energy. Okay, then it comes with the second part is the software. The software moderates and communicates all the information and data. I can't see some of it.
So you can't see?
Yeah, no, it's good now, it's okay. This is what moderates and communicates all the information and data from the connected devices and appliances. The software's two main functions are to monitor and control the energy consumption, and the software's interface is how a user can monitor and control their system. This being achieved through an app or a web portal. So what we're trying to say there is there's two parts. One's the GUI, or the information that the customer can receive on their phone or their app. And the other part is the hardware that sits in the switchboard that controls the household loads or appliances. So a HEMS is a smart and silent partner. It just sits in the background, and a lot of the time the customer doesn't even know it's doing its job. It's a silent partner. It assists you in ensuring the cheapest energy available is used in your home to save you money on your electricity bill without compromising your lifestyle. So it will find the cheapest time to trigger the loads, whether it be a tariff or whether it be the solar or whether it be distribution companies trying to trigger the loads for the cheapest times available, which again goes back to basically cheaper power bills. The type of appliances that can be controlled, well, basically just about everything. Hot waters, pool pumps, pool heaters. We have a lot of pool heaters. Air conditioners, we can ramp air conditioners up and down depending upon how much solar is being produced. Electric vehicles, batteries, solar PV, floor heating, heated towel rails, pumps, quite a lot of appliances, just about everything. And also just any household circuits can be controlled as well. So if a certain circuit wants to be shut off, they can shut that off as well. Next page, please. Okay, benefits and features. Right, we get real-time monitoring. So real-time monitoring actually tells you a lot of information. And if you can gather that information, you can actually see the standby power that's being used by your home at night. So that's a nice little trigger to be able to go around and have a look and see what's plugged in and what's consuming that power at night. And you'll be surprised the savings that you can get by doing that. So the solar optimization program, that program will operate your appliances when the solar is available. So it also has demand tariff and time of use protection. So it makes sure that those appliances are all run on the cheapest time of the tariff. And also on a demand tariff, it can actually slow down the appliance or the air conditioner should it hit the peak demand period. So for instance, if the customer has a 5 kilowatt demand that they've set in their device and it hits that demand, then it'll ramp back the air conditioner till it sits below the 5 kilowatts. And then when you finish cooking or whatever's caused the demand to rise, then the air conditioner will come back up again. So it just levels out and stops I suppose, providing high bills from demand charges. Electric vehicle ready. Again, electric vehicles, people are coming home and charging their cars when they get home during the peak period. That's basically, it's congested, the network's congested, it has a lot of power being consumed at the time. So we have to try and protect the network and move and shift the time when the vehicles get charged. Household power wastage, as I covered before, there's a lot of appliances that are left on when people aren't home. We managed to turn the houses off or just the non-essential appliances during the day. And some of the houses are getting a 30% reduction in their power consumption. So it's quite a large bill when you consider that these things are being left on all the time. You get remote access and control of all appliances when you're not home. So you can go away on holidays and you can turn your hot water off if you're not going to be home for a while and turn it back on when you're coming back from holidays. It's basically a set and forget, automatic control, and it basically tells you when there's a problem. It will email you and alert you when there's an issue with your system. Thanks, Rob. I'm just going to play this video for you. Hopefully it's embedded, Rob, if you may not embed it properly. Now, this is what's explaining the future, and it's here now today. Actually, we're starting to, as Cobargo's taking shape with this trial, there's going to be a lot of communities taking on DERs as part of the network and how power is going to be consumed. So away you go, Rob.
Distributed energy describes the vast array of small-scale energy technologies owned by consumers like rooftop solar, home batteries, electric cars and their charging points, and smart appliances like heating, cooling or pool pumps that can talk to each other and respond to signals from the grid. A quiet energy revolution is taking place as more and more Australians invest in these technologies. Rooftop solar, home batteries and other innovations are putting power into the hands of consumers. Today, more than 1.8 million Australian households already have solar panels on their roofs. Tens of thousands of Australians are installing home batteries in their homes to store electricity and provide backup power. Soon, more and more people will also have electric cars, smart appliances, and home energy management systems that can coordinate and control our energy use. As all of this technology gets cheaper and more efficient, this is only expected to grow. Individually, this reduces household power bills, but collectively, it's transforming the energy system. By 2050, 45% of our electricity is expected to be generated from distributed energy like rooftop solar. Households and businesses are less reliant on big power stations than ever before. That creates lots of challenges for the current system to overcome, like how to manage the voltage or how to predict supply and demand. That's why at ARENA we are supporting the innovations to harness these resources like virtual power plants. If we can make these resources work together, it can make the electricity network stronger and more affordable. As well as being renewable, Australia's future energy generation will be small scale and highly distributed.
Next slide. Thanks, Rob.
Yep. The arrow, is the arrow gone?
So I've just had a question while Rob's trying to sort that out. I've just had a question about whether the product has been, the G switch, there it is there, how it works with the appliances and have we had trials before. You can easily look up Energex. We've done a demand response trial with Energex. It was very successful. It's IPDRS. It was one of the first ever done with internet control for load control for demand response. So that trial was very successful, and there's if anyone wants a copy of the report, I'm quite happy to give it to Rob and Rob can share it out with you. So we have a trial, the trial hardware that's sitting here. Now that's the green part is the G switch. It's DIN rail mounted. It'll sit in your switchboard or it'll sit in an enclosure outside your switchboard. and it'll be cabled between the switchboard and your appliances, basically. It has an internet connection. It'll connect to your router, and then the router will then send signals through the internet to be able to be controlled for the trial. These trials, I suppose, we have what's called, if anyone is interested, to look into demand response and how demand response actually works. There's a set of signals that are sent to it that will ask your house to go into a 50% reduction, or it might go into a 75% reduction. And if that happens, then the switch will then prioritise the appliances that have to stay on, and those that don't have to stay on, like the hot waters and the pool pumps, will be shut down appropriately, depending upon the call that's necessary that the network needs. The little black box next to it, for those, this is an Australian first. We'll be sending LoRaWAN signals. So during the fires or any events that may happen where the internet is lost, the LoRaWAN is a very long distance way of communicating to our devices. It can send up to 6 kilometres from one node and communicate. Basically, if there's a serious problem, it would communicate to the devices or the homes and the businesses to slow down, which a demand response call, and would put those homes into whatever necessary that helps the network stay on and obviously open and running. So next one, thanks, Rob. This is just an overview. This is topology, guys. This is just a quick, easy way of explaining. The appliances are on the right-hand side. What the G switch is basically controlling. Some of those things are in pilot program at the moment, prototypes. But we got local signals, frequency, voltage, demand, and phase balancing. All these data points get sent into the G switch, and the G switch's algorithms will work out a priority of being able to run those appliances appropriately to the most efficient way possible. There's one thing that's missing there on the remote side. So the remote side is the network side, but obviously LoRaWAN will be a part of that in your trial, where LoRaWAN will be sending signals through that. Thanks, Rob. This is just an overview of a house that has their G switch actually turned off. So it gives you an idea that the orange is the solar that's being produced on that 48-hour graph. So as you can see that the solar coming up, you're seeing that the loads, these people have got an electric vehicle, and the electric vehicle is firing, it's about 6 o'clock in the evening, obviously they're coming home and they're firing it, and they've got other loads as well. So you can see that the solar's not being soaked. It's just punching out into the grid. So in this respect, this is a nice picture just to show you how a household would operate, or how their profile is when a normal running of a household without any control. Can you go to the next one, please, Rob? So this is one where the load is actually controlled, and you can see that the dome from the solar now, and you can see the blue line is what the G switch, the loads that are being controlled. So we've got the hot water and the pool pump, and those loads are controlled within the parameters of the solar, making sure you can soak all that solar. So by doing this, you're taking a lot of stresses off the network. You're taking a lot of stresses off the generation side of things. And also you can see there on the donut on the right-hand side is self-consumption is very, very important today. So the more self-consumption you can get, the better the savings are, and the easier it is for the network to be able to control the poles, the wires, and the transformers in the future. So in this case here, they've only imported 2 kilowatts from the grid, and they've actually consumed 18.5 kilowatts from their solar. So their actual consumption from the grid is very, very low. So that's about it. Thanks, Rob. I think I'm quite happy to take any questions if anyone's got any questions.
Does anyone have any questions now for Mark?
So you would need to have appliances which could use, use electricity during time of solar load, such as hot water or pool pumps or electric vehicle. If you don't have those appliances, how would you take advantage of that?
Okay. So the question is, if you have things like pool pumps or water heating or electric vehicles, then their load can be moved, so you can move those to the middle of the day quite easily. What if you have other loads that can't be moved? How helpful will G-Switch be?
They will. The G-Switch will tell you when the loads are coming on through the graph. So if you can't shift the loads, you can't shift the loads. There's nothing you can do. So obviously, if the fridges, for instance, you don't want to turn those off, and small appliances, a lot of appliances you don't want to turn. We're talking about flexible loads you can actually shift. And as I mentioned earlier, those loads were, water heaters and it could be heated towel rails. It could even be batteries you charge for your electric, lawnmowers and those type of things. They're the loads that you can actually shift, and they're very easy to shift. One other thing too, there is a form that we need filled out if you do go down the track. For us, just it tells us what appliances you have. I know Rob will be handing them out for those that are interested. Those forms will give us the information that we need to be able to set up the switch. We'll customize it for your household, basically. So this tells us whether there's the switchboard's capable of taking our switch, as well as all the loads that you have and what we can control with them.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, yes.
The proposition, as I understand it, is for a solar farm and a battery and a ginormous diesel engine burning fossil fuel. Has any thought been given to, and this is a much more expensive proposition, I know, but think big. Solar array, solar farm, wind farm, and pumped hydro. Now, we've got hills around the place, and we all understand how pumped hydro works. It's very basic. You dig a hole in the ground, you fill it with water, you have the solar panels, and when you've got surplus power, you pump the water from that hole in the ground up to another hole in the ground on a hill. When you want to generate power, as you would with a battery, you reverse the flow, the electric motor becomes, and the pump becomes a generator, an alternator, and it probably lasts forever. Where a battery is going to have a limited life. It's made from hugely expensive minerals and has a lot of problems.
Just for people online, so the question was, so the current proposition is for solar farm and battery, but also a diesel generator, which will of course emit greenhouse gas emissions and burns fossil fuels. Have we thought about alternatives such as pumped hydro, where you can, in a hilly area like this, you can pump water uphill and then have it run back downhill, or the pump turns into a generator. Yeah. And so basically acts as a form of storage. Yes, we have. It comes down to cost. It always comes down to cost. I mean, I'd prefer there wasn't any diesel generator at all. But as you saw from the table that Susan put up, if you just have a diesel generator on its own, then it's much cheaper. And if you have just a small diesel generator that runs some of the time, then it's more expensive, but it's not as expensive if you run purely on solar and battery. The thing about, if you do have a diesel generator, say over a 2-week period where you're off the grid, so you're relying on a microgrid, that diesel generator might only run for 1 hour. So it's not something that we're running all the time. It's just that there might be a really massive peak in the load, or there might be 3 days when there's a lot of smoke in the air, so the solar isn't working properly. So then the diesel has to run a bit, but it's not something that would run a lot. So it's not quite as bad as having it like a diesel generator running all the time. Pumped hydro, yes, but it just comes down to cost. Susan, do you have anything else?
Can I just add something, Rob?
Yep.
On the back of that, the HEM systems can be notified that the diesel has started, and for those that can slow down their loads, more than happy, you know, if everyone wants to slow down their loads, they can actually shut that diesel generator down by showing down their loads. So as long as we can see the signals and the network's talking, then we may be able to slow down the air conditioners to 50% to stop that diesel generator from firing.
Yeah, which is the point of the load management trial, to be able to do that sort of thing. But you had another question?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. There is a solution, of course.
Yeah.
We talked to ScoMo and cancelled one of our atomic submarines.
Yeah.
Can I also add
Yes.
that remembering with this project, it's as a community response to what we went through, and it's a first step. We're looking down the track at doing more things. This is just one step forward, and but we want as much input as possible so we can keep that sort of dreaming going and find a way to make it happen.
Yeah. Oh, the 5 megawatt. So when you connect, one of the main costs of setting up a microgrid is that you've got one of the main costs setting up a microgrid is the grid connection process you go through with Essential Energy. And when you go over connecting more than 5 megawatts of generation, that price skyrockets. It's already hundreds of thousands, even below 5 megawatts. And that 5 megawatt is solar plus the battery plus the diesel generator. So anything you might have happening all at the same time. And so that does limit the size of what you're operating. Did you want to say anything about?
Yeah, no, I think
covered it.
Right, and sort of said it all comes down to money. So it's not to say that it couldn't happen in future. For this particular project, just the budget limits this scope to looking at that 5 megawatts and solar. Oh, sorry.
You might have to repeat that by close to the lectern so that you can be heard on the Zoom.
Yeah,
That's all.
Okay.
And just repeat that back to that.
Yeah, budget. Basically, it comes down to budget. The slide, I think it was $11 million. There's this kind of the maximum price if you don't have any diesel. It's like $11 million. It's a lot of money, especially if you want it community owned. So that's why I'm really keen on the load management trial, because if you can actually convince everyone to reduce their loads in times of stress, in times when you have a bushfire, that sort of thing, which would happen anyway, then you can reduce the size of and therefore costs, and therefore the need for a diesel generator significantly. So that's the aim of that. I think you were first and then up the back. Yeah.
So for the load management trial, are you only interested in households or businesses which are on the red feeder line?
Ideally that would be best, but we are looking for low on numbers. So if there are people who aren't, I mean, it has to be ideally within the local area, because and we're doing a feasibility study, and it may be, so we put together this feasibility study. We say this is how big the solar is, this is how big the battery is, this is the part of network and energizers. But then the decision may be made to actually energize more than just that feeder, but to energize the surrounding area as well, in which case it would have to be bigger. But the assumption is it will only be this because of cost, it'll only be this limited. So ideally the people should be within that area. But what we're really looking forward with the load management trial is just to see how effective it is. If we send out a signal, do people say, look, I don't want to do this and pull off? Or do they stay on there and say, you know what, you reduced my air conditioner by 2 degrees. I didn't even notice. I'm happy to do 4 degrees next time. It's that, and in that, to get that sort of information, they don't have to be in Cobargo on that feeder. They can be surrounding areas. So we are actually looking for people in those surrounding areas as well. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment to address the question about pumped hydro.
Yep.
There are a number of other projects on the South Coast with pumped hydro, and I think some of them get including Brown Mountain and Narira. The reality is that Cobargo is not a site that's accessible to the substation for pumped hydro. The only possible site is and I think there are some reasonable environmental issues if you were to suggest to pumped hydro there. The other issue is that the scale of pumped hydro would reduce significantly more than 5 megawatts. So if you would have pushed it up beyond the micro project, what we're looking at here. So I think the reality is there is going to be more pumped hydro than just knowing that to eventually in New South Wales, that it will come from some of those larger aggregated sites. And will obviously help New South Wales offset emissions, and it will feed into the grid and will benefit from it. What we can do here is what's been proposed here. I think we should try and focus on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was basically a comment on pumped hydro, which is that there aren't really any suitable sites in the Cobargo, in the immediate Cobargo region, partly because of cost and partly because of environmental impact. But there are a number of studies going on elsewhere in the South Coast, and so it's hopefully they will get up and they will help the region in general to install more solar and provide more local storage. Is that a That's pretty much it. Okay. And another thing, Muriel just gave me a note here, is that all of this will be helped if people install their own rooftop solar and install their own batteries, behind the meter batteries. And G Switch can do things, and other device providers as well, can actually coordinate your behind the meter battery with a centralized battery. And if, for example, a lot of people do install behind the meter solar and batteries, that will reduce the size of the centralized solar and batteries as well. So there's a number of different factors at play, and you can actually form what's called a virtual power plant, where you basically coordinate or aggregate everyone's behind the meter batteries and run them as a single power station to provide power at certain times, like overnight or during peaks.
Can I just cut in there, Rob? Sorry, our batteries at prototype at the moment, communicating to batteries. We certainly communicate to the solar inverters, but our battery communications is in prototype.
Not quite there yet. Okay. Thanks, Mark. I think that, any more questions? Okay. So I think this is pretty much my last slide. So is there anything you need to do during the trial? Not really. You'll get notification events, or when we're having a road management event, you get a text or an email or a phone call, whichever way you prefer. And then you can, of course, opt out. But after each event, we will ask you to complete a very short survey, because we want to find out from you, did you even notice it happened? Did you hate it? Did you not mind it at all? Would you like to change what you had modified, or the load you had changed, that sort of thing? Be a very short, like 5 questions sort of survey. Then at the end of the trial, we will remove that device, if you wish, for free. So there's no time is there any cost to you. Or we think, depending on what the federal government says, you should be able to keep the device for free, but the device providers do have an annual fee for managing that device, providing the service. And that varies from, I think, $50 and $120 per year. That doesn't go to us, it goes to the device providers. Sorry? Between $50 and $120 per year. Yeah, that one. Depending on which device you've actually got. But if you don't want to keep that device, then it just gets removed for free. No problem at all. Now, I think, oh, sorry, yes.
Yes, I recently registered a business on the website, and but submitted. I've received nothing back. I don't know for sure that you got it. I've not received an email or saying you like it, but they just went into the wild wonder. How do I find out, have you successfully received my registration? And if not, if you can assist actually give some feedback to people when they submit it, perhaps an email back saying we've got you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the question was, a gentleman in the crowd has actually signed up for his business and his home for the load management trial, but he didn't receive any confirmation back. And so he's sort of been left in a bit of a black hole and wondering what is happening. So yeah, we're sorry about that. We should have actually set it up so you were notified. And we will do that now, so it's more of an automatic notification. What I'm also going to do, before we even get more people signing up, I'm going to send out a form to all the people who have signed up, asking for more details, including things like a photograph of your meter box. And then that information will be sent to people like Mark at Intelligent Automation, so you can actually start the process of allocating which of the 3 devices goes to your particular business or household. So yeah, we'll be starting to get more involved in that. But yeah, thanks for that comment. Are there any, maybe I can't actually see here if there are questions online in the chat. Are there any?
So there was a question about power plants, which.
Okay. Okay.
But we can open the floor to more questions, I think.
I think. Oh, okay. Sorry. This is my begging. We've got two more slides. This is my begging slide. Basically, this is the timeline across the top, and this is what we're meant to be doing. So we select the devices, we recruit households and businesses. In May, we allocate the devices. We aggregate the devices into a control system, so they're all working. We do initial testing in June, and trial begins at the very beginning of July. So we're at the beginning of May, and we're still at this point. And so we'd really like to actually start moving to this point, and I will actually start doing allocation devices, but we still do need 18 people to sign up. Businesses or households, especially businesses, because they can be quite large loads, so that we can actually start the trial in the beginning of July or early July. There's that one, and then this. And if you do want to be involved in the trial, there's a web address there where you can register, and you can complete the form, and we'll now get back to you and provide you with more information. And if you do complete the form, you're under no obligation to participate. You might decide when we get back to you, provide you more information. You might say, no, this isn't for me. Completely fine. And even if you do decide to participate in the trial and we install a device, you can still opt out of any event if it's just not going to work for you. So, because we have to make this work for the community, because it is voluntary. It is voluntary. So if people don't want to do it, then it won't work. So we need to make it work for the community. Sorry, Alex?
There's a question online. Must you be connected to the internet at all times to use the load management devices?
No. No, because Mark mentioned we've got this special communications network that we're using. It's only for the G switch devices. So we've got 3 different device types. Some of I think all of them can work through 4G. So it can just work through mobile. Some of them can work through Wi-Fi as well. And even if you don't have 4G or Wi-Fi, we can still connect you through the LoRaWAN, which is basically a completely separate parallel communication system. LoRa, it stands for long range something or other. Thank you. Long range wide area network that will operate directly only with the G switch devices. So no, you don't have to be connected to the internet.
Are the slides from today's present meeting available online?
They will be on the Cobargo, on the Cadet website. Sure. I can't either. I couldn't either. I was actually, as you were showing it first, I was thinking, I'm colourblind. So I was thinking, really? I couldn't. Yeah. That same website. Yeah. It'll be put up on that. And yeah. And I think we're going to make that line much thicker. Or maybe a different colour, orange. And then I think the question was, will the presentation be put online? It will. And there was a comment about the line that represents the feeder being a red line that goes through Cobargo, which couldn't be seen. I couldn't see it either. We might make it thicker or orange or something, like fluoro orange or something like that. And I think now it's just opening for general questions, and the questions on any part of the presentation today, the load management trial or location of the solar farms or anything, just open up for general discussion. Oh, okay. Questions. There's another, this one, that one. Okay. Next community consultation meeting, 2 to 3 months. We haven't specified an exact date there because there's a lot of different things actually happening in the local community. So we need to sort of coordinate with people on the ground here to make sure we hold it at a time that works for everyone. And with the load management trial, as mentioned, I will be following up with the people who have already signed on. And also you can is there an info, like a question, an email you can ask questions on through the Cobargo, through the website? So if you have any more questions about any of this, then you can go to the website and ask questions there as well. No, not yet. Yep.
Thanks very much, everybody. I'm Zena Armstrong. I'm the president of Cadet. All right, so Zena Armstrong, president of Cadet. We have 11 people on the committee or on the team at the moment, and plenty of opportunity for other people to come and join us in any capacity. So as Deborah said earlier, we welcome anybody, no matter what skills you might have or the level of interest. I just want to say a little bit about the site selection. So there are a lot of conversations happening at the moment with a number of private landowners, some of whom have come forward themselves to ask for their sites to be evaluated. And you will have seen from the slide, they do encircle the village. And of course, there is the Narira Park Sports Ground. Now, I have a particular interest in the Narira Park Sports Ground for a number of different reasons. I really think that this is a project that the community should own and that the community really needs to benefit from directly. There is a big international movement towards renewable energy, and I think as small rural communities living on the edge of the grid in the way that we are, and the vulnerability that we've all experienced and we've been through, and I mean we have blackouts quite regularly, I feel that the community itself really does need to think about how are we as a community going to be part of this renewable energy transition. We don't want to get overlooked in this transition. We do have really strong claims here as a small community for installing renewable energy solutions. If we're not careful though, we may not be able to capitalise on the benefits that renewable energy is going to bring into Australia. So we actually do need to stand up and say, we want to be part of this. We want to do what they're doing in Northern Victoria. We want to be part of what might be happening up in Byron. We want to be part of this move towards microgrid that ITP has been championing in communities out in the bush and in Pacific. In Cobargo, I think we want to be a part of this. There is a benefit to be gained here, both in terms of our own costs, in terms of what we pay for energy, what we actually can contribute to helping reduce the impact of emissions, but also the money, the revenue that we might be able to bring into Cobargo. And the sports ground is an area of Cobargo that everybody wants to use, but we don't have the money to maintain it. And we're not likely to get the money to maintain it either. So I've been talking to Bill Boyle on the sports ground committee about the struggles they have, even just to keep the place mown. So you will have seen the amount of regrowth that's happened after the bushfires, or the black wattle that's coming up there. You can't actually walk through the creek anymore. It is a fire risk, and the RFS has made it very clear to Crown Lands that there's a fire risk on that northern part of the village. We saw the fire as it came down through those creeks at the back of Rich and Caddy's place. And I think if we did have something like this as an anchor project on the sports ground that was well maintained, that was discreet, that was generating funding for us to actually maintain that ground, and to really redevelop it as a proper community asset. So to get these sports grounds working again, get the footy pitch fully maintained, get the cricket pitch happening, maybe get some walks going through to the cemetery, could actually be something that would be a really, really great asset for us into the future. So I just want to put that pitch in. I am one of a number of people on Cadets, and I know that ITP has got ideas about what a site might look like, the size of the site that might be needed. It may well be that the sports ground isn't going to offer the right amount of land.
When you talk about the sports ground, you talking about putting solar panels between Oval and the highway?
That's one option that we're looking at, but it's quite wet there. So we, and I've been talking to, well, the Oval, where the golf course was, but also there's an area that is behind all of the residences that's actually not used. On the other side of the creek, yeah. So that's another possibility. Yeah. Is that the area, John?
Yeah, it's on the eastern side. It's not the part you can't really see, as you know where it is. It's up way over the back. That's the best part.
It reduces the visual impact as well. It's quite close to the substation, and it seems that that might be suitable. It's possibly not quite big enough in terms of area, but I can see some real benefits for the community if we could actually have that as an anchor project on that site, and then be able to use the revenue that's generated to maintain the sports ground as a sports ground and as a proper community asset. So that's something I just want to leave you all with, to have a little bit of a think about it. It may be controversial in the community. I know people, you know, that's why we're doing the consultation. We really need to know what people think about these different options for the site. But I really hope that the village will see the benefits in this. I think that there are hip pocket benefits as well as the social benefits from what we're trying to do here. This is not require funding either. So to get the money to actually fund this feasibility study, we competed with a lot of other national projects that were put forward by other communities like ours. And our project has got quite a lot of interest for small communities that are as vulnerable as we are on the edge of the grid. And the government thought that what we put forward together with ITP was very competitive and it would have scalability. So it would be something that would be of value to other small communities in rural and regional areas. Yeah, I guess I'm just asking for community support and go out and talk to people about it and let them know that this is something that could be quite good for all of us. Yeah.
The area you're talking about that could be developed, small design.
It's small.
On the east of the old golf course.
As John said, it's
part of it.
That's part of it. To do the between 3 and 5 megawatts of solar that are needed, you don't need the whole of what is known as Narira Park. I prefer to call it Narira Park rather than the sports ground. There is, I think, 10 sports ground.
So John's just explained that for the people online, we're not talking about the sports ground, the sports facilities itself. We're talking about Narira Park as a whole.
But we're conscious that the land that would be both suitable from its flow point of view and from visual impact, etc., is to the north and to the east of the footy ground, and to the west towards the highway would be, if this project were to succeed with the revenue that comes in, it would be maintained for other community uses. A small botanical garden, etc. But the idea is there is enough land there. There are some challenges with it. It's not perfect land, but it's within the scope that will be suitable for a solar farm.
So the area that we're looking at is within the scope of what we're looking at for a solar farm, and it would be looked at as an integrated project that might also include a botanical garden, which is what a number of people in the community were also looking for. It could help us develop walks and just to improve the whole of the Narira Park amenity for the use of the community and enable it to be maintained properly. Yeah.
And just reiterate two big concerns that we have going forward. Number one is the asset protection issues that without some treatment proactive asset protection activities that Narira Park is going to present a major hazard again.
John, why don't you come and talk about those? No? So John's just talking about the concerns of the RFS concerns about the hazard management and the risks that are posed to the village with Narira Park and the need to make sure that it is kept properly maintained.
And finally, the community is losing the park altogether because Crown Land are currently reviewing all their assets right throughout the state, and when they're being underused or not used for the original community purposes, they may start to think about disposing of them or reallocating.
And the other point that John is raising is that Crown Lands are reviewing and have been reviewing the usage of Crown Lands right across the state. And those Crown Lands which are not being used for their original purpose are vulnerable to potential different uses, including perhaps addressing housing shortages, which is a very high priority across the state, as we've seen here in Cobargo as well.
We have a slide with that areas.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. ITP, anything more that you'd like to add?
No, we've answered, I think we've answered both questions.
So to wrap up, please be involved in any way that you would like or you can. You can contact us at any time on the website, renewablecobargo.com. Start thinking about those issues that Zena and John and others have brought up around the Narira Park land. We don't want to lose that as a community, and it could really benefit the community if it was developed properly, and it could reinvigorate the life of the sports ground as well. So let's just start having those conversations with your neighbours, with us, bring it all together, and let's get this load control trial ramped up. Talk to your neighbours, talk to any businesses around. We need to get more people signed up to do it. So the load management trial.
Just a reminder there, we do have some of the devices on display over here. There's some of them are real, some of them are dummy devices. If you just want to have a quick look at what might be installed on your meter box, yeah, they'll be over there.
For those of you out there in Zoom land, thanks for joining us today. And this has been recorded, will be put up on the website for anyone that has missed it. So again, spread the word, but stay in touch and come and join the journey. It's very exciting. Thank you. And thank you all here today for joining us.